So, hello. First, I would like to thank the organizers of the EETC Congress to invite me and give me the possibility to introduce several studies of Professor Heiner Rindermann investigating the impact of pre-K education, especially the impact of crash attendance on children's intelligence and behavior. First, I would like to provide a brief review of previous studies on early childhood education and care in the US and in Germany. After this, I will present our first study on crash attendance effects at kindergarten age, and after that, our second study on crash effects at primary school age. So we investigated short to middle term and middle to longer term effects of crash attendance. And we conducted two studies in cooperation with Katharina Tatzel and Elke Führer. Let me first give a brief definition of what we mean by crash. Crash is center care for children in institutions like kindergarten from the first few months of life until the end of age 2, whereas kindergarten is usually attended to by children who are 3 to 6 years old. And in Germany, for a long time, and also in German-speaking countries like Switzerland and Austria, crash and kindergarten for a long time have not been regarded as schools with an educational mission, but rather as care and playground institutions. In the last decade, the educational purpose has become much more relevant in politics and in daily practice. So, and as you know, there are huge variations between preschool education programs and their effects. So let us have a look at previous studies on early childhood education and care. And I would like to mention two well-known and important US studies, namely the Perry preschool program starting in the 1960s and the ABCDarian program starting in the 1970s. Perry preschool was the less intensive program for children from 3 to 4 years old till public school. It was a half-day program including home visits. The ABCDarian program started at the first few months of life, and it was a year-round and full-day center care till school entry. These programs focused on children whose parents had a low educational background and who were living in poverty, and both programs applied randomized trials. For example, Perry preschool program had 58 children participating in the experimental group and 65 children in the control group. The results of both programs were very remarkable, since both could show an increase in intelligence. The more intensive the program was, the more stable was the increase in intelligence. Also, both programs showed positive effects on children's behavior and attitudes. And in the long term, when the participants were already adults, they were less involved in crime and delinquency. Not only positive effects on children's behavior have been found, for example, in the context of the NICHD studies. More hours of center care were associated with superior cognitive development on the one side, but also with more teacher-reported externalizing problems. That is, the children behaved more aggressively according to their teachers' ratings, though their scores did not reach clinical levels. And this is an especially important finding for our own studies, and I will come back to it. Fritschi and Oesch found that crash attendance in Germany increases the probability of enrollment to so-called university preparatory school, which is a high-level secondary school track in Germany for pupils from the age of 10 to 11 years on. The effects were larger for disadvantaged children, and the effects remained even after controlling for covariates. Unfortunately, psychological factors like cognitive or socio-emotional development of these pupils have not been assessed. Rindermann and Sisi conducted a cross-country comparison of kindergarten effects, and their results back up the aforementioned findings on this aggregated data level. Here you can see a path model. Values at arrows are standardized path coefficients, and values in parentheses are bivariate correlations. Kindergarten attendance on this cross-country level increases intelligence. It results in increased achievement test scores. You can see the PISA sum here. Also, kindergarten has a positive impact on school positive behavior of the children. It results in more discipline. It results in earlier school enrollment, in decreased grade retention, and in a higher educational level of society. And it can be concluded that early childhood education and care increases the cognitive human capital, and this in turn results in economic growth. You can see on the right side of the model, GDP stands for gross domestic product. What needs to be investigated is what are the psychological factors of early childhood education and care. And especially in Austria, studies on crash attendance effects are lacking. And this is the reason why we conducted 2 studies there. And with these studies, we investigated whether crash attendance has a positive impact on children's cognitive and socio-emotional development, as well as their learning behavior. The first study focused on short to middle term effects of crash attendance, namely crash effects at kindergarten age. And the second study was concerned with longer term effects of crash attendance, namely effects at primary school age. Moreover, we investigated whether in Austria, regarding school success, similar results can be found like in Germany. And we looked whether crash effects are larger on immigrants. So I will present the first study, crash effects at kindergarten age. In this study, 62 children participated who were 4 to 6 years old and who were in their second kindergarten year. 31 children formerly had attended crash, and 31 children who did not attend crash were matched according to age, gender, and family characteristics like number of siblings or family completeness. As a test of overall development, we administered the Wiener Entwicklungstest by Kastner-Koller and Daimann, and we selected subtests assessing verbal and cognitive development, socio-emotional development, and motor development. Moreover, parents were asked to fill in a socio-demographic questionnaire assessing, for example, the highest completed level of education, as well as parental educational activities with their child, for example, reading books together or visiting museums. Kindergarten teachers were asked to rate whether behavior problems occurred, and for this purpose a modified version of the child behavior checklist was administered, measuring aggressiveness amongst others. Now we come to the results. In the upper part of the table you see the results of the total sample consisting of 62 children, and in the lower part you can see that we conducted a separate analysis for our rather small immigrant subsample of 11 children whose parents were from Eastern Europe and Western Asia. And you can see in the upper part that crash attendance correlates highly with overall development as well as with all subscales. And the effect on cognitive development equates to 11 IQ points. In the immigrant subsample, we conducted partial correlations controlling for parental educational level and educational activities. And you can see that for children with a disadvantaged background, crash attendance was associated to even larger developmental gains if you compare the d-values in the upper and the lower part of this table. Behavior problems were slightly higher for children with crash experience, and more intensive crash attendance increased teacher-reported behavior problems. Here you can see a path model revealing the relative magnitude of crash attendance effects versus parental educational level effects. Again, values at arrows, are standardized path coefficient, and values in parentheses are bivariate correlations. Some paths are missing, and this is due to sample matching. The path coefficients are 0. You can see that crash attendance is a very strong predictor of overall development, followed by no immigration background and by parental educational level. Children without an immigration background not only have less problems with the verbal cognitive scales of the developmental test, but they also score higher regarding socio-emotional and motor development. To sum up, the results of this first study corroborate previous findings showing that education received at crashes supports children's cognitive and socio-emotional development. Regarding behavior problems, however, we found similar results like the ones in the context of the NICHD studies. Namely, kindergarten teachers reported more aggressive behavior for children who formerly had attended crash. So in this first study, we were interested in crash effects at kindergarten age, and in the second study, we investigated crash effects at primary school age. For this second study, 18 primary schools in Austria and 900 parents were contacted. From this pool, we identified 52 pupils who formerly had attended crash. You have to know that crash attendance is below 5% in Austria, thus it was very difficult to find these children. We then randomly selected 66 pupils for comparison, and these 66 pupils visited the same primary schools like the 52 pupils. And the total sample consisted of 118 children who were 9 to 11 years old and who were fourth graders at several primary schools in Austria. As a test of intelligence, we administered the German version of the cognitive abilities test by Thorndike and Hagen, measuring verbal, quantitative numerical, and non-verbal figural abilities. Moreover, teachers were asked to rate the social behavior and the learning behavior of the children. And the teachers were asked to indicate which secondary school they would recommend for each pupil based on his or her current grades. In Austria, secondary education is divided in a vocational technical and a university preparatory track. Of course, parents were again asked to indicate their highest completed level of education and in which educational activities they engage together with their children. Now we come to the results regarding cognitive development. Again, in the upper part of the table, you see the results of the total sample of 118 children, and in the lower part, you see the results of the immigrant subsample, this time consisting of 21 children. Prior crash attendance correlated significantly with overall intelligence at primary school age. This correlation, however, was moderated by parental educational level, parental educational activities, family structure, and immigration background, since partialing these four variables out reduced the correlation between crash attendance and cognitive abilities. And for the immigrant subsample, controlling for parental education and educational activities revealed that crash attendance did not significantly correlate with cognitive abilities. Prior crash attendance was associated with more negative ratings of primary school teachers regarding social behavior and learning behavior of the pupils. Intensity of crash attendance, however, did not matter in the second study. Okay, and this path model shows that crash attendance has a strong positive direct impact on cognitive ability, but also an indirect negative impact on cognitive ability through its negative impact on learning behavior. Moreover, crash attendance has both positive and negative effects on secondary school recommendation. The effect through increased cognitive ability is positive, but crash attendance also exhibits a negative effect on learning behavior and a negative effect on secondary school recommendation by primary school teachers. Moreover, the second study has shown that the quality of the preschool curriculum matters, and one aspect of this quality are behavior rules modeled by preschool teachers and communicated to the children. In the second study, we asked parents to indicate in retrospect whether behavior rules existed at crash and were communicated to their children, and in fact, if behavior rules existed at crash, they are associated with primary school teachers rating the learning behavior of the pupil more positively. Moreover, you can see that there is a negative relationship between crash attendance and educational behavior of parents. This means that parents who have less time for their children, for example, double-income households, are more likely to send their children to crash, and this in turn reduces time spent together. An especially critical finding is that educational level of parents has a strong impact on primary school teachers' secondary school recommendation, independent of variables that would be relevant for school success, for example, the pupil's intelligence or learning behavior. And this means that primary school teachers in our sample favor pupils from higher educated families. To sum up, the second study has shown that crash attendance has a strong positive and direct impact on cognitive ability, but also an indirect negative impact on cognitive ability through its negative impact on learning behavior. Crash attendance has both positive and negative effects on secondary school recommendation. And the sum of these positive and negative effects turns out to be negative. Compared to the first study, the second study has shown that positive effects diminish at primary school age compared to kindergarten age, but they are still observable. It can be concluded that crash attendance supports cognitive development, that the effects diminish in the long term, and that the positive effect on cognitive development is masked by a negative effect on learning behavior. How to interpret the behavior problems? One interpretation could be that children who visit center care very early do have very early peer contacts and experience very early peer conflicts, and these might serve as an assertiveness training, making these pupils behaving more self-confidently. And maybe this is misinterpreted by teachers as aggressiveness. Another interpretation could be that separating children very early from their parents could have a negative effect on attachment security. What needs to be explained is why we found different results regarding the behavior of the pupils and children compared to the peri-preschool and the ABCDarian program, since these programs found a positive effect on children's behavior. One explanation could be that these programs were special needs programs, whereas in our studies we investigated regular crash attendance. And the specific strength of the methods applied is that they cover a large spectrum of functional areas of children's development, ranging from cognitive development to socio-emotional development and behavior. Regarding migration background, we have mixed findings. Sometimes crash is especially beneficial and sometimes not. One problem of our studies is that we had quite small immigrant subsamples, and in future studies we should look for larger immigrant subsamples to investigate it in more detail. And the second study especially has shown that the quality of preschool curriculum matters. If behavior rules existed at crash, they had a positive impact on learning behavior at primary school age. What needs to be investigated is the parents' role. Do they really select preschools? How do they affect the preschool curriculum, and how is their own educational behavior affected by preschool? And currently our research group is conducting a series of experiments investigating the impact of quality of the preschool curriculum in more detail. So, thank you very much.
Questions?
Can you say a little more about the content of the crash programs and at what ages they operated?
Yeah. In Germany, and in Austria, where we conducted the studies, these crashes had a rather traditional focus, so they did offer more general experiences like healthy food and not such a stringent curriculum like other crashes would offer in the US, for example. This is the traditional focus of letting the children play freely. Yeah.
And at what ages?
Yeah, from some weeks after birth until the end of age 2.
Age 2?
End of age 2, so 2 years and 11 months. Mm-hmm. But some children visited crash in our sample longer than it would be usual. They were above 3 years.
Okay, any other questions?
I'm wondering about potential moderating effects of the parents' either education, not just the direct effect, but sort of for upper middle class families who chose to go this route versus those who did not. Maybe you would see different effects.
we have conducted other studies in which we could show that, for example, parents with a higher level of education often choose private institutions for crashes and kindergartens in German-speaking countries. Yeah, but in these studies, we did not analyze this aspect.
And when you have analyzed it, have you found that the quality of the crash matters much
Yes.
more than whether or not they've gone?
Yes. For example, parents with a higher educational level in another study more often chose progressive kindergartens, Montessori kindergarten, for example. And they, again, this Montessori kindergartens in another study were associated with higher quality. We have applied a German version of the ECAS. I don't know whether I spell it in the right way.
Is there another question in the back?
Yeah, I was wondering what formal schooling would add to these differences, because you referred to a study in which the criterion variable was the result in the PISA studies. But these studies are carried out when children are 14 years old, and they have been in formal education for quite a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
So is it still an effect of what happens up to 3 years old, or is it something that happens in later years that capitalizes on possible differences at an early age?
Yeah, thank you very much. Very good question. Rindermann and Sisi compared several countries. In this path model, it was 39 countries, and they have shown that also the percentage of how many children of a country visit kindergarten predicts, for example, achievement test scores like the PISA sum. So it has, as early preschool, has an effect on educational level of society.
But is that independent of what children learn during formal education? That's my question. Or do you have a good guess about what's going on there?
Well, that's a good question. We think that especially the quality of the preschool curriculum matters, and we also think that, for example, immigrant subsamples in our studies maybe have chosen preschools with a less high quality, and that this might also explain why sometimes they don't gain so much from preschool education. Thank you.